Om Ajnanatimire Loke Pradurbhuta Pradipakaha Namostu Bodhisattvaya Sambuddhaya Namo. Namostu Bodhisattvaya Sambuddhaya Namo Namaha. Om Buddham Sharanam Gacchami Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. The translation of the verse which was chanted is, in this world that's covered in darkness, a light has shined, which is in the form of the Buddha. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Swami Vivekananda says, he was the greatest man that was ever born, the greatest soul power that was ever manifested. I believe, Swami Vivekananda says, that he was God. He is my Ishta. And we know when Swami Vivekananda was a very young boy, he says that he had a vision of the Buddha. That began his lifelong love for the man and the principle. The Encyclopedia of Religion says of Buddha, he was the greatest to have lived on this earth and who has influenced the life and thought of more than half the human race. Because of the nobility of his character, the vastness of his vision, the depth of his compassion, and the profundity of his teaching, Buddha and the idealization of his life is inevitable. His life was written as Lalita Vistara. It was the first hagiography of the Lord. Today we will look at briefly at the person as well as the principle, because he always insisted that Buddha is a state of awakening, and everyone is eligible for this state. A few centuries after his great parinirvana, the final liberation, in the northern schools of Buddhism, he was designated as Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of immeasurable light. So we can understand the principle through the person, which is always inevitable. That's how the mind actually works. Buddhism as a dharma, as a sangha, it spread so fast and changed the history and culture of Asia in a few centuries. And they did it with the strength of the Dharma, their morality, their intellectual and spiritual prowess. From Japan right down to Anatolia, we had the Buddhist bhikkhus, monks, going around preaching the words of the Buddha. He was born as was called Shakya Muni, the sage of the Shakyas, because he was born in the clan of the Shakyas. He was also called the Shakya Singha, the lion of the clan of the Shakyas. He was born, as tradition and history says, 568 years before Common Era. His father was a small chieftain in a small kingdom which is now in Nepal. So the father was Shuddhodhan, and the kingdom was Kapilavatthu. His mother, Buddha's mother, was the noble Maya Devi. She was a princess of the Kolya clan. And the Shakyas and the Kolyas often married amongst themselves for obvious political and military reasons. When it was time to conceive him, she had left for her mother's place. And in those days, it was natural for the girl to go to a parent's place. But in a beautiful grove called Lumbini, she had rested there because she was feeling the contractions, the birth pangs, and she gave birth to a beautiful boy. The mother died 3 days later from the effort. So he was brought up by his aunt, Prajapati, Mahaprajapati, who was also one of Buddha's father's wife. Astrologers, sages, and saints, they came to see the newborn. And there was one old sage who was waiting, he says, for the great deliverer, the one who would bring light, the one who would bring the light of enlightenment and, you can say, bliss to the people. And when he came, he saw the babe, took it in his arms, and said, now I can safely pass away. The world is safe. Horoscopes, etc., were drawn up, and it was a unanimous consensus amongst the sages and astrologers that this is going to be either a great king or a great conqueror of human hearts. He will conquer the world. His father wanted him to be a great king for obvious reasons. But when he understood that he could be also a monk, he kept the Lord, the babe, away from all types of distractions and all types of religious, you can say, influences. There was, of course, a time when he was 4, he was found deeply absorbed in meditation. There was some kind of a sowing festival where the king participated in the sowing of the first seeds. And they were searching for him. And they were searching and saying, where is he? And they found him seated deeply in meditation. They roused him. They brought him back. He was trained as a prince was trained in those days, in the military arts, in diplomacy, in statecraft, and moreover, he was excellent in the use of the sword. He became an excellent swordsman. So his completion of his education, he married the beautiful Yashodhara. She was now a princess of the Kolya dynasty. And many people, they think that she was always in the wings, sideline. She wasn't. Because of her, she used to discuss with her husband high philosophy. And not only that, she had a great, deep sense of altruism, which made her go around the city and help the poor. She kept this a secret from husband and from others also. But she was very noble. He grew up. They had a son. His name was Rahul. And as traditions goes, that once he was curious to know what's outside the palace and outside the, you can say, the sterile atmosphere that he was kept in without religion. But he was deeply religious. He used to ask these pointed questions about existence, about what is the reality. But probably to just dramatize it, they say that he left with the charioteer one night, goes with on the chariot on a tour of the city, and he sees for the first time his charioteer was Chana. He sees an old man. And he asks his charioteer, what is this? Who is this? He said, my lord, this is what happens to everyone. Will it happen to me also? Yes. And they went a little further and they found a sick man lying on the side of the road, uncared for. So Buddha asks, who is that person? What's happening? Oh, my lord, this is a person who is sick. This is a sick man. And a little further they go, and then they see the people carrying a dead man to the cremation grounds. So what is this? That is death. This is the end of every physical body. Will these things happen to me also? Everyone. And that sparked that great search. See, his name was Siddhartha. That is, one who has attained his goal. He was also Gautama. He was from the ancient clan of the sage Gautama. So he was called Gautama. And when he was perplexed with these questions, old age, sickness, and death, he was trying to solve the problem. Can one avoid these inevitable things that happen to the body? thinking about this thing, he's saying he had to leave the palace and go out and search for the answers. And when he had decided, his wife, Yashodhara, was very intuitive. She understood and she encouraged her. This is not known much, saying he abandoned her, etc., etc. He didn't. They had long discussions on the nature of truth and existence and how to avoid these, as they say, sicknesses, old age, and death. And it was she who encouraged him, go out and search. And one night, it was full moon, he saw his wife and his son by her side, sleeping, child. He looked longingly at them and he left the room. And he found that his riding clothes, his boots, etc., everything were kept ready. His horse was kept ready. And so he left the palace and rode. And then they say he had this long hair, which he asked his charioteer to cut, gave away all the royal robes, put on the ochre cloth, this color, and left. For 6 years, he went and searched. The first teacher he had was Alara Kalama. He was, as I say, in what is called Bihar, Rajgir now. He studied the Sankhya. He wasn't satisfied. He went to another teacher, Uddhaka Ramaputra, where he studied further. But Ramaputra was an ascetic. So he learned philosophy, the Sankhya philosophy, and then he learned asceticism. And still he wasn't satisfied. Though he had, under both these teachers, attained all the lower stages of samadhi. And the teachers were mighty pleased that such a brilliant student and diligent too. So it was not that it was something new that he plunged into meditation and got it. It does not ever happen like that. For 6 years, he practiced his meditation and austerity, and he reduced his food to a minimum of, he had 1 grain of rice per day. He was accompanied by a group of 5 ascetics who were also like him, very severe. And one day when he was sitting to meditate, he was so weak he swooned and fell. A girl was passing by with porridge to offer to some deity in the forest. She saw an old monk swooned, and she offered that porridge to him, payasam. And that's why today also, wherever there's Buddhism, there's payasam also. So he ate that porridge, he felt fortified, and then he goes to that now famous tree called the Bodhi tree, the great Indian people tree. And he sat down for 49 days there with this vow: let my body wither away, let my skin and everything dry. I am not going to move from this seat until I have attained that which is difficult to attain in countless cycles of creation. Ihasane shushatu me shariram vakastimansam pralayanstuyatu Aprapya bodhim bahukalpa durlabam. Naivasanat kaya matasya. And with this resolve, it's for more than 2,400 years, these words have thrilled millions and millions of spiritual seekers. This is the grit, this is the determination that we require. No soft approach. He never blamed any gods, he never blamed any destiny, he never blamed circumstances, etc., etc. Never. He depended on his own exertion, on his own strength. And that is what makes him unique. His mind, Swami Vivekananda says, was uncluttered. It was not superstition. He was rational. And he used this to reach the goal. You know, they say that just before you attain the final, you can say, illumination, nature throws its best forms in front of the yogi. People say, oh, they have attained some enlightenment and illumination, and there's some Kundalini awakening. They don't really realize what this whole, you can say, illumination really is. Just a little, you can say, the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and space, they are excellent forms, the best, sublime, beautiful forms are sent out to tempt the Buddha. And it is depicted as Mara comes to tempt him. And his clear insight sees through this illusion. Of course, the books made it out as in the first earth came in the form of a beautiful woman, and she danced, and Buddha was looking at her straight and quiet, could see through her. She was so furious. She left in a huff, and the moment she left, earthquakes and volcanoes began around the Buddha. The whole world was quaking. It was full of sounds and fury. After a while, it subsided. Then came another girl, and she too danced in front of the Buddha, and she also left. That was the element of water. And she left, and then the whole earth, as it were, was drenched in water, raining and floods everywhere. The floods came right up to where Buddha sat. Buddha was unmoved. She left, and all the, can say, chimera also stopped. Then the third girl comes. She too dances, and she too leaves, and she is fire, and everything in this world was burning, blazing. The fire almost reached up to where Buddha was seated. His clear insight banished fire. And then air comes. She dances, she goes, and then she blows out everything. Trees and everything were uprooted. There was great destruction. And it fell short of where Buddha sat. Then space comes, and the space curls and wraps and expands. Buddha is sitting quiet. So these were, you can say, stories that symbolically mean that the yogi has, towards the very end, has to conquer all the 5 elements in nature. That is, the yogi conquers the entire nature. He conquers the past, the present, and future. Did it. He was on the cusp, and he let go. And he he attained that state. That state which is called the immeasurable light. Sri Ramakrishna's first vision of Kali was an ocean of light. He's saying, I saw waves rushing from all sides and they submerged me and I sank inside, panting. Such a thing happens when you see the whole, you can see world or reality as light. Swami Vivekananda, he also says, I am like a piece of glass in an ocean of light. This ocean of light is that immeasurable light. He attained that state. The Gautama Siddhartha Buddha, he became the Buddha. He attained the state of nirvana. Now, the later Buddhists, in order to keep them distinct from the mother religion, in the mother religion, we had something called the Brahma Nirvana. You extinguish yourself into Brahman. Nirvana means the extinguishment. So you get extinguished in Brahman. But the Buddhist philosophers later, they made it like, it's just nirvana, just extinguishment. So this was his attainment. And after he rose from the seat, he was so full of bliss. For 7 days, he paced up and down and up and down. His body couldn't just contain that bliss. And it happens like that. People think they have illumination and then nothing happens to their body. Oh, the body, if it's not ready, it will just fragment. It will break apart. The whole thing is to prepare your body in such a way that you can hold onto that kind of experience. So he goes to Benares from Bodh Gaya, now which is called Bodh Gaya. And then he went to Sarnath and he preached the first sermon. And that too, he was urged by the various gods. Now that you have known the truth, preach it. This is, so he looked around and said, I don't see anyone eligible enough to practice this. And they said, no, dilute it a little, keep on. You need to help humankind. And then we know that he started the Dharma Chakra Parvartan, the turning of the wheel of Dharma at Sarnath. There is pain, there is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, there is a means to end suffering, and there's an end to suffering. It's called the fourfold truths of the Aryans or the Arya Satyan. And the means he gave, right speech, right perception, right cognition, right work, right meditation, etc. That was the eightfold path he gave. So he went round, they say, for more than 40 years, he went round, preached his gospel. He had left his home when he was 29. For 6 years, he had gone around. So till about 34, 35, when he attained that state, and he preached this doctrine to everybody till he was 80. And at Kushinara, where he passed away, to the last moment, he was strong yet. And his disciples were all weeping. Saying, what's happening to you? I have taught you to be strong. I don't expect you to be weeping here. So he says, that's the first thing. Work out diligently your own salvation. Be a light unto yourself. Atma Deepo Bhava. This is a great, the final word he's saying. Be a light unto all, a lamp unto yourself. So he preached nothing but strength and self-effort. Keep away from the superstitions and the mystery mongering. That is not religion. Religion should make you strong, not weak, not dependent. And we are doing exactly opposite. When we become religious, we become dependent. We go on crawling on our knees to hundreds of temples and hundreds of deities. Stand on your own feet. That's what the Buddha says. Another great thing, he opened his path for everybody. And then another great thing he did, he organized the monks. The first time the monks were organized. And as we know, the moment they were organized, they rolled down Asia in waves and converted it to their ideas of Buddhism. The second time it had happened when Shankaracharya had reorganized the monks, and that was another wave that swept the world. The third time it was reorganized at the time of Swami Vivekananda. He reorganized. And like waves, this monastic, you can say, waves are slowly inundating the world. That's a great thing. And as we know, Swami Vivekananda also brought out the idea of a Sangha. You can see how the Ramakrishna Dharma, which is the essence of Vedanta and Hinduism, the idea of a Sangha, an idea of the Buddha as state to be attained. Buddha is a person, Buddha is a state. He was considered an atheist. And obviously, because he went out denouncing all gods, that's historians make it like that. He never went around denouncing anything. So he was called an atheist because he never actively preached a God. So Sri Ramakrishna says, quote, do you know what Buddha means? It is to become one with Bodha, pure intelligence. By meditating on that pure intelligence, which is of the nature of purity, it is to become pure intelligence itself. So when you meditate on pure intelligence, Bodha, you become pure intelligence. Then he says, why atheist? He was not an atheist, Ramakrishna says. He simply could not express his inner experiences in words. This too is the sport of God, a new Leela of God. Why should Buddha be called an atheist? When one realizes Swarupa, the one's real nature, the true nature of oneself, one attains a state that is something between existence, asti, and non-existence, nasti. These are but the attributes of Prakriti, nature. The reality is beyond both, which Buddha experienced. So this existence and non-existence, we are running about all these with great mighty terms, and we have strung a lot of meanings to these. What is existence and what is non-existence? And we see these are the attributes of Prakriti, of nature. And as we've seen, the best forms of nature came to Buddha, and he saw it through his clear sight. That is called vipassana. Vipassana means to see clearly. Vi and pasya. It's meditation, yeah, but you must be able to see things very clearly. This is vipassana method, meditation. And as we see, Swami Vijnanananda, one time, he had gone to Benares for doing the work of Sri Ramakrishna. That is, in order to construct some buildings, because he was trained as a civil engineer. So one day, he quietly left and went walking all the way to Sarna. That's about 25 miles, 20 miles, something like that. He went there, and a guide was taking him around the museum, and he saw a huge stone slab with all the life of the Buddha carved into it. And he was gazing at it with wonder. He saw everything come to life, as it were. And then he says, the entire thing opened. In his own words, he says, I saw a formless ocean of light, and the whole universe was gradually merging into it. Like a speck, I was watching that blissful glow with wonder, standing on the shore of that ocean of light. I was beside myself. Then, in the twinkling of an eye, the universe completely disappeared. And from the ocean of pure consciousness, the compassionate, loving form of Buddha appeared. What a joy. Even now, while describing it, I feel that joy. I was in that state for some time. So here we have a state which is called immeasurable light, which is a state called the Buddha. And the state is accessible to everyone, because if the state was only meant for the Buddha, for Siddhartha Gautama to become Buddha, it would be impossible just to even preach it. But here we have the same thing experienced by a disciple of Ramakrishna. And this was not very, very long ago, 1930, 1926 or 27. So he saw himself as a speck at the edge of an ocean of light, and the whole universe merging into it. And then the beautiful form of the Buddha emerging. This is called the Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of immeasurable light. Another day, he was going to the Shiva temple called the Vishwanath temple in Benares. And as he went in, he's saying, why am I come here to see a piece of stone? And there also, he's saying, the same experience was repeated. I got that same experience. Shiva showed me that it is the same. And it has to be the same. You cannot have two different oceans of light. So there also he saw the entire universe merging in that light. Now, where is that ocean of light? It is within us. That is, it is within our reach. The real form of this universe, as we have seen from these experiences, is nothing but an emergence out from that ocean of light, and it will merge. Because if the universe merges in that ocean of light, that means it has emerged out of it. So this entire universe has emerged from that ocean of light. And that light is within all of us. If we reach down deep enough, we will reach that ocean of light. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, Swami. We now have an opportunity for questions. If any of you have questions, please write it down. I'm going to begin by asking, once the Dalai Lama was asked, is it possible to be a Christian and a Buddhist? And he said in the beginning, yes, but as you go deeper into your path, no. Now, the same question we as Vedantins would ask, is it possible to be both a Vedantin and a Buddhist?
Oh, yes. I explain Buddhism as Vedanta without God.
But what about the idea of consciousness? The two are separate, aren't they?
Oh, no, it's one. It just cannot be.
Separate consciousness being separate segments of consciousness.
No, they cannot be. Then it's not consciousness. Like Swami Vivekananda says, you cannot divide infinity. Each will limit the other. There is only consciousness. And people call it by various names. That's all. There has been, for thousands of years, a data on consciousness, which is called Upanishads. Today, physicists are searching for consciousness. Biologists are searching for consciousness. Psychologists are searching for consciousness. Psychiatrists are searching and neurology, everybody searching for consciousness. And we had all this data for thousands of years. We knew what is consciousness. And that consciousness is this, that immeasurable consciousness. Now for the next one. Okay.
One person asked, what are the ways was Swami Vivekananda like the Buddha? It seems they both were very determined.
What is the way? Yeah. And you should follow the great teachers. You should also be determined. As I mentioned, Swami Vivekananda, when he was very young, he had a vision, he says, of the Buddha, of a calm looking monk, straight, tall, carrying the monk's water pot. So that was a great influence on his life. So we follow that, his determination. In fact, the life of the Buddha, you can see, if you read it, sometimes you wonder whether the life of Christ itself has borrowed aspects, or there's a lot of similarities you find. Lot of similarities. So his story, it is dramatized, it is, yes, but this story is the story of every human being. Every human being will, at one time of his or her existence, will have to face this question: what is real? Then the story will have great relevance to us.
Swami, what is the meaning of first being the light to oneself?
Oh, Atma Deepo Bhava, to be independent. Don't depend on everybody, on anything or anybody. No, even your own intellectual, you can say, structures that you have built could be completely biased. we all have a biases. So here he says, be your own light. That means be your own strength. Stand, and Swami Vivekananda says, stand on your feet and be men, he says. And he's saying, we have wept for long. No more weeping. Stand on your feet. You see, these are the words, the universal truths, and which was articulated by Buddha differently and Vivekananda, the same truth.
Are there other questions? We have another question, but it's pending, Swami.
Ah.
Swami, how does the Belar Mat celebrate Buddha Purnima?
Oh, in a grand way. Buddha was always recognized as an incarnation. Because when Buddhism had become corrupted with the Vajrayana Tantra, the Tantras, the whole structure was going to topple down. And it had to be then reabsorbed into the mother church. And the best way we did was to make Buddha an incarnation. So he's called the 9th incarnation of God, of Vishnu. So there he is. So the moment we absorbed him in the Hindu pantheon, then there was no Buddhism in India. It was all. You see, the Emperor Ashoka, he was a great Mauryan emperor, and he's considered one of the greatest emperors of the world. Not even Caesar can be compared to him. They say he was a greater. He, after the Kalinga War, great change came over him, and he became a Buddhist. He had the doctrines of the Buddha. And since he ruled the entire subcontinent, if the king becomes a Buddhist, everybody becomes a Buddhist in time. So it was he who sent missionaries to all parts of the world, to Asia, the known world. There were monks in Alexandria, in Damascus, in all these places, right up from Japan. They were. And he had placed this Ashoka pillars, which are even now still today being discovered all over. He sent ambassadors and monks. So he helped spread Buddhism, as it were. So that is how we see Buddha. He was absorbed back into the mother church. Of course, the Buddhists don't like to hear that. But there was no sharp distinction between what is called Buddhism and Hinduism. These are all, you can say, terms coined by the colonial, you can say, masters. There was no such thing as Hinduism. It's just a century old, the word. So there was no such thing as Buddhism. It was a reform movement within the mother church. That is what is called Buddhism.
Swami, what was the source of Buddha's great strength of will?
Everyone has it. He emphasized it. Everyone. I'm a man amongst men. You see, the conviction of the powers of goodness, the conviction what you're doing is true, that concentrates the will. And the will is nothing but the intellect. The intellect that is fine-tuned and employed in a work or a thought is called will. There is no such separate faculty in the mind called the will or willpower. It is the intellect, the buddhi, that becomes fine, one-pointed, and employed. That becomes the willpower.
Swami, how can Advaita help us in our dualistic sadhana, such as meditation on the Ishta?
Sri Ramakrishna says, tie the knot of Advaita in the corner of your cloth and then do what you want. So, and Sri Ramakrishna was very clear that you just can't ascend to Advaita straight. So Dvaita, as long as you have a body, you are a dualist. You feel your body, you're a dualist. So you start from dualism, ascend to qualified non-dualism, and then come to non-dualism. That's the 3 stages. So this Sri Ramakrishna says, God is out there. That's dualism. The second stage is God is within and has become everything. And the third is there is no I, there is no world, there is no God. There is only Advaita. People just glibly talk about Advaita. You just cannot glibly talk and then glibly meditate. It needs that dualistic grounding, then the qualified non-dualistic grounding, and only then when your mind has matured enough, it can go towards. If you remember, it was only Swami Vivekananda who was trained in Advaita from the very beginning by Sri Ramakrishna, whom Swami Vivekananda himself was chafing at the idea. He didn't want to. But Sri Ramakrishna saw that he was the only, not even Raja Maharaj or any other direct disciples. No, they were considered world movers. So they have taught us that we have to ascend stage by stage, and then it becomes easy for us to accept and live the Advaita. So, tie the knot of Advaita in your hand. Today, all the sciences and everything is talking about in a indirect way, talking about the one and the many. There is the one in the many. So this is a great time for the philosophy of Advaita take hold on it. And we can see that we start with ideas of dualism and proceed.
Swami, one question. Please give a simple teaching of the Buddha that we can practice in our everyday life.
The same. Be a light unto yourself. That's a more simple teaching, and spread that light to everybody. Like the Bible says, don't put it under the bushel. You light something, you take it out so that you can light up others also. So that is the best way. You have to be very strong, and you have the strength. Only you have thought yourself as weak, and you have become weak now. So think now that you are strong, be a light unto yourself. Remember the word Atma, Deepo, Bhava. Bhava is to be. Atma is the self. Be a light, Deepo. Be a lamp unto yourself.
Swami, Vivekananda established the Advaita ashram in Mayavati, the only place where dualistic worship was to be excluded. How is that practiced today? And you mentioned how beautifully you have to begin with dualism, qualified non-dualism, and only are you qualified. So how does that work at the Advaita ashram in Mayavati?
The disciplines of practicing Advaita is hearing, cogitating on what you have heard, and meditating. It's called a Shravana and Manana and Nididhyasana. Shravana is to hear the words of the scripture. But in this case, you read the books, the doctrines of the Advaita, and then you think deeply on it, manana, and then meditate on the conclusions after what you have arrived from that deep thinking, cogitation. So in this case, it was an exclusive, you can say, idea of Advaita. Now, you in Advaita Ashram Mayavati, we have a busy center. You have got to see, as long as you have a body, you have to maintain it. And then you'll have to have a farm and a garden and a dairy. And then we have something, it's a publication center, and you got to publish books. So it is not only for yourself, but for others also. So we publish books so that the light of Advaita can be brought to the world. There is also, in most of our centers, our hospital centers, we never used to have a temple, or if a temple was built, it was only secondary. That it was always the worship of the Atman in all humans. So that is also Advaita. So we also have an hospital in Mayavati, in Advaita Ashram. Every Advaita Ashrama has to have some form of practicality. Because Advaita is not just intellectual, it is dynamic. It is thought and action. So when you serve others, serve them with this idea that this is the Atman. And it is translating Swami Vivekananda's ideas of Narayana Seva, that everybody is that Lord himself and we serve them. So that is Advaita in practice. Advaita in theory and Advaita in practice. Otherwise, what happens is we'll get stuck up like the old Advaitans. The world is an illusion. Only I am real. My ego is real. That is bad Advaita. So if the world is unreal, you too are unreal. So that's why Swami Vivekananda says he has made it in such a way that the theoretical side, the hearing, the cogitating, and the meditation, and plus the dynamic side of Advaita, that is, go out and serve everybody as the Atman.